Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our podcast about climate change and environmental issues. So today we are here with
Oscar.
Johan.
Thank you for being here. And now we will start our podcast. And I'm Catherine, and
I am Helena.
And we are going to be hosts of this podcast. So,
Enjoy.
have you noticed any changes caused by climate change or environmental issues? And if you have, then which ones?
Yeah, Estonian weather has been quite different lately. Actually, noticeably different. It's more like the extremes are much more noticeable. The norms are almost the same, but we have extreme weather like half a meter of snow, and that was a really rare thing to see, but now it was like 2 years in a row, which is really weird. And also the summer is getting quite hotter because usually it was like 25 degrees was the max. Now it's like 30, almost daily.
Yeah, it's also interesting. And what about you?
And yeah, it's the same in Norway. When it is snowing, it snows a lot more than Estonia, I assume. But makes sense. But during the summer, the weather is also much hotter, and when it is an extreme, it's just like sort of the same. But extreme weather is sort of more common. There's more storms and stuff.
Can someone of you guys think of a solution?
Yes, just reduce our carbon emissions and make a way to get carbon out of the atmosphere and all the other greenhouse gases. All the scientists are working on a method, but no luck yet.
Yeah. We have to, do stuff like planting more trees and finding some other carbon capture thing. But we don't have sort of answers to that yet. They are working on it, and we just need to all cooperate and reduce our emissions.
So you guys said that there's more snow than usual in the last years. Would you say that sometimes climate change or environmental issues can have some pros?
I mean, there's pros and cons, but I think the cons are outweighing the pros with this type of climate change because just overall the amount of species that we have is going to be reduced, and eventually most of the northern species are just going to be extinct. Already there's, pretty sure in Estonia, no longer Christmas trees. They can no longer grow naturally in a forest in Estonia.
Wow. Yeah. And of course in Norway, a lot of animals are threatened. We have a lot of polar bears up north. And they're, of course, sort of losing their habitat due to global warming, and it's threatening their way of life. It's harder for them to get food, and they end up more often in our streets, rummaging through the trash to survive, instead of getting to the seals they used to catch, because sort of ice has melted and made everything different.
Do your countries use green energy or only fossil fuels?
We're trying to switch from fossil fuels right now, but the county Ida-Viru, the entire economy was based on fossil fuels, and it's really difficult to switch from that in a short period of time, because if you just remove 90% of the jobs, then what's going to happen? The whole county is going to collapse and everybody's going to be poor. And it already is a poor county. It's the poorest county in Estonia. So they're building some kind of new factory, probably was to do with energy. And also we're discussing building a nuclear power plant. Toila is one of the options where to build it, which would be pretty interesting. But nuclear power plant would be a good solution. It's a hot topic, but I think nuclear energy is honestly a pretty good solution because even the nuclear waste that it produces, it's still usable and we can still harness the energy of that because we just don't have the technology for it now, but it's still energy and we can still use it once we get the hang of it.
Yeah. Norway is, of course, sort of self-reliant when it comes to green energy. We have hydropower and wind power. Our problem is that we sell our energy, and we have had sort of an energy crisis because we sold all our energy to Germany. But we also, despite the fact that we have green energy and our country sort of run on that, we export oil. So we're not really any better. We're just not doing the emissions ourselves. We're just selling it to someone else. So our economy is sort of based on fossil fuel. But we just don't use it ourselves. And we, have the highest amount of electric cars in the world. But when we try to build green energy, we're building a lot of windmills, it's been a huge controversy because the government built windmill on indigenous people's land. So there's been lots of boycotts and strikes and sort of trouble within this. So we sort of have to balance the shift to green energy without stepping on the toes of the Sami people. Because when you want to build a windmill, you want to build it somewhere that there aren't any people. And then you often end up putting it where they herd the reindeers and whatnot.
Johan, could you please explain what you meant by nuclear energies or what nuclear energies are?
Basically, nuclear energy, right now you can't exactly call it a green energy because there are nuclear waste and it is a problem. But in the future, we know that it's possible to extract energy from the nuclear waste that we're producing right now. So we just need the technology for it. And currently, they're also working on a thermonuclear reactor which produces 100% clean energy. There's no byproduct.
And also Finland is sort of digging all the nuclear waste into the ground.
Also the nuclear waste disposal facilities.
Yes.
And they're pretty big.
So they have sort of found a solution for it as well. So nuclear energy is definitely sort of the way to go.
Yeah.
It produces a lot more than our civil windmills.
Yeah, it's just a matter of efficiency, and it really just, there's no really big downside. Sure, people can say nuclear waste, but it's not a problem if we think about the future. We can just simply use it for other energy, so we should continue using it on the transmission, because it's not a permanent solution, but thermonuclear energy pretty much is. It's just energy. It's just creating a mini sun, and it's just creating energy.
I think people are just afraid because of, Chernobyl and other nuclear reactors that sort of diminished the name of nuclear energy and sort of made people scared of it.
Yeah.
So no one wants to live near the machine, so where are they going to build it? And that's sort of the issue.
I think the issue is also, like you said, people are scared of it, but being scared of it is more about just not knowing enough of it, because they were both really freak accidents, and I mean, both were due to human error, nothing like unprecedented. Like Fukushima was just that building contractors, I'm pretty sure they made the third tidal wall, like the wall that was made to stop the tsunami. They made it a little too small, and they knew they made it a little too small, but the chances were so small that something was actually going to happen. So they just took the risk. The government's fault pretty much for allowing it, but
and building it near a place where tsunamis could happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you shouldn't take a risk like that.
Yeah,
that's just
build it somewhere safer.
Yeah, but then Chernobyl was just pure human error, just stupid experiment, and the fact that they're still from Toila, like 70 kilometers from Toila or something, maybe 100, is a nuclear reactor that's using exactly the same type of reactor as in Chernobyl.
Yeah.
The same version. So that's kind of scary to live near that, but it's fine.
But I think one of the major issues when it comes to sort of creating renewable energy and just carbon emissions in general is that even if countries like Norway and Estonia lower our emissions, it's not really going to do much, which is why we sort of need international cooperation that forces the actual big polluters to lower their emissions. Like, for example, China, which I think is trying to switch over to renewable energy now, which is very good. You need that kind of things. Same with India and various African countries, which still have sort of dirty industries that pollute a lot. What Estonia and Norway doesn't really matter that much. And
so it's just about setting an example.
Yeah.
You just need to show that it's possible.
And especially in Norway, this discussion around the fact that we're like a huge oil exporter. So there's a lot of people who want us to stop exporting oil, even though our economy is sort of built around it. I mean, we're filthy rich because of it. But then there's the counter argument of if Norway stops producing oil, the Gulf countries are just going to start producing more, take over our shares of the market. And we have sort of cleaner oil because we use renewable energy to power the oil platforms. So it's like, there's a lot of different sides to the question of oil and fossil fuels for our economy, and just whether or not it even matters if we do these kind of things. Because, I mean, we're not the ones destroying the world, I guess.
I mean, we're pretty small countries, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like, look at the 8 billion in the world that there are, and then Norway has how many people?
We have 5.
And we have 1. Like, it doesn't really matter that much.
Yeah, but But if we don't do it, then no one's gonna do it.
Yeah.
We all just have to do like a collective effort. And also, it also goes a lot to sort of not necessarily the nations that pollute, but the various large corporations. It was like 100 companies stood for like 50% of all emissions, something like that. So it's sort of the private initiative that's really damaging the environment. And how are we supposed to stop that? How are we supposed to make them change their ways?
I mean, it's just in human nature to be greedy. Just we have to overcome it.
Yeah. So what we really need to do then, what actual people can do, is sort of use our economic powers by, not pushing them in certain directions, by using our consumer power, not buying from these corporations or pushing them in a direction that's more green. So like sort of the collective effort and what we can do sort of comes down to that.
And what's your ideas? How can you make, for example, those big polluted countries to switch to green energy? And how long do you think it would actually take to make a major difference worldwide?
Well, I mean, with like the meeting in Cairo, that was like the most recent environmental global meeting thing. China pledged to switch over to nuclear energy and renewable energy, and sort of the initiative of all the other countries are what pushing these people. And also, you can invest in their countries. The whole world can sort of come together and build a nuclear reactor in India or Ghana or whatever. So, because of course, I understand that, like, for example, African countries, they don't really have the time or money to think about the environment. They're thinking about surviving and growing. Meanwhile, countries like Norway, since we're so rich, we can invest in these things. We can make renewable energy. So we can't really, at the same time, we can't expect the poor countries to do the same because they don't have the money or the time to invest in that. So that's why sort of the international community has to come together to actually build this in these countries.
So what do you think? Is the climate change only an environmental issue?
It's affecting everything. If we don't do anything about it, humanity will probably cease to exist. Unless we go to Mars first, of course, which is also possible. But, I mean, it's an Earth issue, a whole, because it's just going to affect everything because it has a ripple effect. And also the butterfly effect is also an effect here. Said effect too much, but if you make something happen that already is affecting the whole economy, then it's going to affect every single bit of the economy. It's going to make money worth less. It's going to make everything worth less.
Yeah, it is definitely a global issue, and especially the impact it has on extreme weather and those sort of things, like the flooding in Pakistan and hurricanes in Florida, for example. It sort of intensifies these super intense weather phenomenons. So yeah, it's not just like, oh no, our water is turning slightly browner. It's actually killing people and destroying cities.
The water level is going to be rising a lot as well. And that will just make I don't know what the estimates were, but I'm guessing like 10% of land is just going to be inhabitable because it's going to be underwater. The polar ice caps actually contain a lot of water, and it's all going to be added into the oceans, which is not good if you have any idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, and I mean, Norway's just mountains, so we're all going to be okay.
Yeah, you're going to be fine, but
yeah,
Estonia is just completely flat land.
Yeah, exactly. And then you have island countries like Tuvalu and Vanuatu. They're going to disappear within like 30 years.
Yeah.
And they've been saying this in like UN meetings and stuff, and no one really seems to care. These countries are going to be gone. And they basically just got their independence as well. So they didn't really have a very long run. And it's very unfortunate, but they're like so small that people don't seem to care about Nauru and Vanuatu and Tuvalu.
I think people are thinking too much about the general public and not the individuality of countries, because if you look at it from a whole world perspective, sure, noticeable amount of people are going to die, but so what? We can commit to producing more oil and stuff and just get more rich and more resources, but let those poor people die, the rich will live on.
What arguments could make you think or make other people think that like climate change doesn't exist or it doesn't have that much impact?
I mean, the friend that otherwise, instead of me, would have came here to be on the podcast doesn't believe in climate change, or at least he says he doesn't believe that it has such a big effect. He's saying that climate has been changing all the time, all across history, which is true, and he doesn't believe that this time is an exception that is being caused by human behavior. So he thinks it's just being caused by natural things and it's going to go back to normal. And even when you provide evidence for those kinds of people, they just say no. You can't really argue with a flat earther. It's not an argument. It's just them saying no and you providing. They're not making any single logical argument. They're just saying no. You give them scientific evidence that's completely true, and they just say no, it's false. The government faked it.
Yeah, I think these people will just naturally not agree with it because, green energy and sort of climate change has sort of been heralded in as a sort of very progressive movement, and it's tied to that. So conservatism will just sort of naturally go against it. So it sort of comes from that. They're gonna deny it regardless of the evidence till they see their cities drowning.
Yeah, pretty much that. We just need, I don't think they're going to, even then, there are just simply delusional people who will not accept that it's human behavior. They will say, oh, God made it this way.
How can we reach a lot of people to be aware of the consequences that we face now and the bigger problems we will face when we don't take action now while we can?
Just raising overall knowledge about the subject, like this podcast, probably, even if it helps one person understand that it is a problem, that already can have an effect. Because if they're a motivated person and they think that they should do something, then they will start speaking to their family and friends about it, and it will progress. Helping one person makes a kind of a positive feedback loop, because he helps his whole family, okay, and then his friends, okay, his friends help their families, and then their families help their friends, and then it just keeps growing exponentially. And this is, of course, in an ideal world. Most people are not going to get that motivated from this. But if we could convey that motivation to help the world, then it would just spread all across the world.
Yeah, the problem is when you try to spread awareness in sort of annoying ways, people are going to be turned off from it. Like, for example, gluing yourself to the ground to stop traffic, or throwing soups at painting. That's like a thing people do.
Yeah.
I don't think that's spreading awareness in a positive way. You're just turning people away from it because people don't want to be associated with it. So you have to not just get attention, you have to get positive attention and make sure that people, realize that it's important and that we have to do something without it being a general annoyance to their lives. Because people just think about themselves. If someone stops the traffic, they're just going to be annoyed at the people, not think, wow, I hate climate change.
Wow, what a hero. He glued himself to the floor.
Yeah.
really doing much, stopping the traffic and making them stay in the cars longer so that there's more carbon emissions.
Yeah.
Really useful.
And after reaching this knowledge, what can we do with it to improve environmental circumstances?
Like when people are aware of it and believe that the climate change is real, what can they do? It's almost like what you said, like the feedback loop, but can they do more?
If we're talking on an individual viewpoint, then just start walking more instead of using your car. I know that some people have to drive 20 kilometers to their work or something, but even then, my parents ride their bicycle to work almost daily, and it's 15 kilometers there and back 15. So just go to work 1 hour earlier. And also use public transport. We just need to make public transport a little better and more accessible, maybe make it free, because in our county in Estonia it actually is free to use the bus, and it's working pretty well, and it's definitely more resourceful than driving with a car that can hold 5 people. It's more useful to drive in a bus with loads of people, because in the bus you can still hold 40 people, and that's saving a lot of our precious carbon emission budget.
And also most buses go on biogas, at least in my country, so it's a lot less polluting. But it's sort of the small things you do, and the fact when more and more people do it, what your impact is on an individual level obviously isn't that big, but multiple people do it, you start getting collective efforts. So you have to use your power as a consumer to support the right corporations, maybe not buy 1 million articles of clothing every year. Use what you have, repair what's broken, go to thrift stores and reuse, recycle. It's just all these small things put together that sort of makes a difference.
Yeah, and even then, you said that on an individual level, but if you start doing it individually, some people will notice, because I've actually taken a lot of inspiration from one of my friends. He's always picking up trash when we're outside, and I just start doing the same, and it's going to have a ripple effect.
Would you say, is your hometown polluted?
Well, my hometown definitely isn't polluted because it's such a small place and it's a small community. I think the pollution in cities is just a big community thing because people don't really care about, you don't know every single person you see when you walk past them. If you know the person you're next to or walking on the street, you won't throw trash on the floor because he will judge you. If you're in a city, nobody cares. They don't know you. What does it matter?
In my city, it used to be an industrial town. We had a lot of factories, but they've all sort of been put away, so we don't really produce anything anymore. Like the paper mill has been closed, so I wouldn't say we're really polluting anymore. I mean, we still have like an oats factory, but I don't know how much that pollutes. We also have one of the major issues is that we're on a very important ferry route that takes us across the fjord, as we have a ferry that goes back 200 times a day. But now we'll switch over to an electric ferry, so I wouldn't say we're sort of polluting the same anymore. So it's actually, we've made a lot of difference switching to buses with biogas. We have definitely made a shift, in our local efforts to be less polluting. So we can see it at the local government level, you can make a lot of difference. And that's where, sort of your votes can go and participate in elections, vote for the parties that actually makes a difference. Yeah.
So to summarize, we can say that everybody has to take at least small steps to make a world a better place. And thank you guys for coming. Thank you for this talk and see you next time.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us. Yeah.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
In diesem englischsprachigen Podcast mit TeilnehmerInnen aus Deutschland, Estland, Lettland und Norwegen haben wir Fragen bezüglich des aktuellen umweltlichen und sozialen Problems des Klimawandels gestellt. Unsere Fragen wurden in folgender Reihenfolge gestellt. Als erstes hat Katrina die Frage, ob Ihnen Veränderungen aufgefallen sind, deren Ursache beim Klimawandel wiederzufinden sind und darauf folgend, ob es dafür irgendwelche Lösungen gibt. Hat es auch irgendwelche guten Seiten an sich von einer beliebigen Perspektive? Kam daraufhin als Frage, die eventuell die vorher genannten Probleme untergräbt und dem Ganzen eine schönere Farbe gibt. Die vierte Frage, benutzt euer Heimatland grüne Energie oder nur fossile Brennstoffe, zeigte dann doch die Notwendigkeit einer Veränderung, nachdem einer der Gäste sagt, dass es hart ist, auf umweltliche Energie umzusteigen. Aber auch erwähnt, dass nukleare Energie auch eine gute Alternative zu fossilen Brennstoffen ist. Was nukleare Energie ist, wurde darauf mit der nächsten Frage auch beantwortet. Wie kann man die großen Verschmutzer dazu bringen, auf grüne Energie umzusteigen? War eine komplexe Frage, die die Gäste beantwortet haben mit der Antwort, dass man als kleines Land einfach anfangen und ein Vorbild sein muss. Ist der Klimawandel nur ein umweltliches Problem? War eine Frage, die darauf nochmal folgte und auf die diversen Probleme aufmerksam machte. Dennoch gibt es Menschen, die sich die Konsequenzen des Klimawandels nicht bewusst sind und deshalb hat uns die Antwort auf die Frage, was für Argumente könnte dich oder andere glauben lassen, dass es den Klimawandel nicht gibt oder zumindest, dass er nicht so einen großen Effekt hat, sehr interessiert. Für die Gäste ist es klar, dass der Klimawandel existiert und verheerende Folgen hat, wenn alles so bleibt, wie es aktuell ist. Auf die Frage, wie man viele Leute erreichen kann, um sie auf die jetzigen Probleme und die noch größeren Probleme, die Folgen haben werden, wenn wir nichts ändern, bewusst zu machen, hat die klare Antwort bekommen, dass es klein anfängt und man auf Grundlage des Podcasts bauen kann. Die nächste Frage war, was man mit dem erhaltenen Wissen machen kann, um die jetzigen umweltlichen Umstände zu verbessern, und die Antwort darauf ähnelte der Antwort zur vorherigen Frage, dass man vorher darüber reden sollte, um mehr Leute zu erreichen, die es weiterteilen und daraus ein positiver Feedback-Loop entsteht. Ob deren Stadt verschmutzt ist, beantworten sie mit Nein, weil sie aus Orten kommen, bei denen man sich kennt und niemand sich trauen würde, etwas auf den Boden zu schmeißen. Das waren nun alle Fragen, die gute Impulse auf den Weg mitgeben, sich mit einem der drängendsten Themen dieser Zeit zu beschäftigen. Diese Erkenntnisse und Meinungen mögen inspirieren und ermutigen, gemeinsam sich für eine nachhaltige Zukunft einzusetzen. Dankeschön fürs Zuhören.